Can't speak.
We're now live.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the South Planning Committee. I am Councillor David Evans, Chair of this committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed, so members of the public will be able to hear on audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology. Should any committee member experience technology difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number they have already been supplied. Everyone is requested to mute their microphone unless they ask to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak, but nothing else, so that it's clear who is asking to speak and the debate has to be heard for those listening on audio feed. Members are asked to ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on an item if you have not heard all the debate. As chairman, I will interpret the council's existing standing orders in the light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making the ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disposable pecuniary interest they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so that listening now who is speaking. Role of the chairman and pecuniary interest. Members are reminded to disclose pecuniary interest in any matter to be discussed which is not included in the register of interests, and leave the meeting by turning off the camera and muting the microphone prior to the matter being discussed. To read out each member's name and ask them to confirm presence and confirm any interest. David Evans, Chairman. I have no interest. David Turner, Vice Chairman.
I'm present and I have no interests.
Andy Boddington.
No interests.
Michael Wood.
Present and no interest to declare.
Richard Huffer. Richard Huffer.
Present and no interest.
Cecilia Motley.
Present, no interest.
Tony Parsons.
Present and no interest.
Madge Shinton.
Present. I'm the local member for the item on the agenda which is under discussion.
Robert Tyndall. Robert Tyndall. Tina Woodward.
Present and no interest.
Thank you. Michael Wood is today substituting for Nick Hignett.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Robert, have you any pecuniary interest?
Yes, well, I don't think so, but my wife used to work at the old Vicarage Activity Centre for the vendor, but I've had absolutely no involvement in this planning application at all.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Please can the officers now confirm their presence? Planning officers.
Tim Rogers, I'm the manager for the development management team.
Ian Kilby, I'm the head of planning services.
Solicitor.
Miranda Garrard, solicitor.
Thank you. Committee officer.
Ward committee officer.
And any other officers present?
Richard Fortune, principal planner.
Thank you. I shall now turn to the item on the agenda. Apologies, please. To receive apologies.
We've had apologies from councillors Nick Hignett and Simon Harris, and as you said, Councillor Michael Wood is substituted for Councillor Hignett.
Thank you. Right, to confirm the minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of March. I move the minutes. Could I have a seconder, please?
David Turner, pleased to second.
Thank you. I now accept the minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates any differently. Public questions.
No public questions, Chair.
Thank you. Confirm the public questions are stated. If no, so the solicitor can read out the public questions. Pecuniary interest we've already done. Now the chairman is turning into substantive items. I will be inviting the planning officer to present before them, dealing with the public speaking part of the meeting, then ask for comments of the committee. The Old Vicarage Centre, the Bullring, Stotterton, Kidderminster. Will the planning officer now introduce the item, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It's Tim Rogers, the Development Management Team Manager. Yeah, the application before you is a full application for change of use from a mixed residential, commercial, training and hostel use to a mixed care home and education use. The report is as set out in the papers before you. I believe that members were circulated with a list of late representations in response to the application. Since that list was produced, I believe that members have been emailed individually with by a number of people in connection with the application. So I just wanted to reference those to make it clear that members have are aware of those submissions. So there were emails submitted by an A. Clugston, which was on the 31st of May at 18:59, a J. Beattie on the 1st of June 20 at 13:33, a G. Whitehouse on the 1st of June at 10:21, C. Madeley on the 1st of June at 18:29, and a further one from a C. Glover on the 1st of June at 22:16. So members will need to take those emails that have been sent directly to them into account. And furthermore, we have received submissions that have been made to the MP Philip Dunn from 3 local residents in respect of the application, which members will not have seen and only came to us as officers late yesterday. So in order to give due regard to those submissions, I am going to reference the points made in those submissions to the MP. Firstly, the first point is that many villagers are elderly or vulnerable within the settlement of Stotterston. Secondly, that there is a very strong feeling within the community against this proposal. Thirdly, there is concern that the virtual meeting and the use of technology will sanitize the debate about the proposal. Fourthly, a concern that the report is compromised and biased in favour of the applicant. Fifthly, a concern that the preoccupation with the current COVID crisis is being used as a smokescreen for consideration of the application. Next point, many technical weaknesses. There are many technical weaknesses in the application. Next point, the applicant's compass have failed to engage with the local community. The next point, there is concern that the proposal will potentially lead to undesirable people loitering around the application premises. The next point is that the location is considered unsuitable as there are no facilities or transport links. A linked point to one previously made, that virtual committees are concerned that they advantage the applicants. And finally, a point that the CPRE have claimed that the virtual committees are shutting down democratic accountability. I would also make members aware that we've received one further very short email from the applicants expressing disappointment that residents are continuing to suggest that the intended occupants of the facility are criminals or offenders. It's been clear throughout the application process that is not the case. And secondly, as a statement to committee, the applicants would say that the children intended to occupy the facility have suffered because of an adult's actions or inactions and have been bullied as a result of a disability or difficulty. They are children who need care and support. So I think, Chair, that brings us up to date in terms of the late and very late representations. I tend to now move on to the proposal itself. As explained, the proposal is primarily and almost solely an application for change of use from its existing use as a residential, commercial, training and hostel use to the care home and education use, the full planning application, and there are very little by way of physical changes proposed to the building. The only change would be a slight alteration to a conservatory, an existing conservatory roof on the property. If I just run through the slides, if we could move on to the next slide, please. That gives a location plan in the bottom left-hand corner, which shows the access coming into the vicarage premises from the centre of the village of Stotterston, the driveway that runs around to the left through a wooded area, and there's a large garden. I'll come out. There are photographs to show this later, but there's a large garden in front of the property and a parking area to the left-hand side as you look at the front of the property. The floor plans, which I have to say, aren't copying particularly well for these purposes. The floor plans shows the proposed floor plan for the ground floor of the property. As I say, there are no proposals to change anything physically about the building other than that slight addition to the conservatory roof. Move on to the next slide, please. This is the only elevations of the building that I intend to show you the members, because this is the elevation that has the very slight change to the roof on it, and you will see that there is a very slight alteration to the roof in the vicinity of the. If you look at the lower part of the building to the left, the roof above the double doors and the two windows will change ever so slightly, but that is the only, and that's set back within that elevation. So there is virtually no real external change to the building that would have be visible in any real way at all. Next slide, please. That's the proposed ground floor plan of the building. As I say, there are no intentions to change to alter the building. It's just to utilize the rooms as they are existing within the property. But change to the next slide, please. I'll just run through these floor plans very quickly. That's the existing ground floor plan. If we move on again, please. Proposed first floor plan of the property. Move on again, please. Importantly, the property, although it is of some age, it is not listed. It's not a non-designated heritage asset. So internal alterations to the building, so internal layout of the rooms, such as there may be, are not subject to any planning control. Again, that's the second floor plan. If we could move on to the next, and that's the proposed second floor plan of the building. As I say, the actual physical changes to the building externally are negligible. Any internal alterations, as I say, don't require consent. If I could just at that point move on to the report. Members will note the proposal as listed. They will note the site location. If we could just stop at that point, I'll come back to the slides in a moment. The reason why the application has come before the planning committee in section 3 of the report. Also note the community representations in section 4 of the report, and importantly note that Stotterston Parish Council do object to the current planning application for the reasons set out in the report. The original comment from the Parish Council wasn't a formal objection, although they did reference concerns of the local community in their original submission. You will also note in the remainder of section 4 of the report that there were a number of statutory consultees who were consulted, and internal consultees who were all asked for their opinion on the application, and the report sets out the responses that were received, and there were no formal objections from any of those consulted about the application. Members will be aware from the reading of the report and from subsequent correspondence received that there has been a lot of local interest in the application, and a lot of submission in terms of concerns of the local community. They will also know that there have been some correspondence received that is in support of the proposal, and I'll come on to say more of that a little bit later. If I then move on to sections 5 and 6 of the report. Section 5 basically outlines the main considerations that officers need to take account of, and members need to take account of in coming to their decision on this application. So those are set out in a tabled form at paragraph 5, and then beyond that, from paragraph 6 onwards, is the officer appraisal of the proposal. And that sets out all the officer's opinion of all of the on all of the material considerations. At that point, I'll come back to the slides and take you through each of those in turn and just explain what they are. So that slide is a view to the left from the exit of the roadway up to the vicarage and the church. So that's the view to the left. If I could move on to the next slide, please. That's the view looking up the lane that leads up to the vicarage and the church, the access up. Next slide, please. That's the view to the right of the axis as you come down the driveway that we've just looked up on the previous slide. Next slide, please. That's a pic of the vicarage building as it currently is, and would essentially remain. Next slide, please. That's a view of the side of the vicarage. There are a number of outbuildings that are existing, would be retained and utilised as part of the proposal. Next slide, please. That is the one elevation where there is the proposed slight change to the roof. So there would be a slight alteration to that elevation. But again, the side elevation of the building. Next slide, please. Sorry, I lost my bearings on that. That is the elevation that will be changed. So you will see that roof would be changed to a slightly sloping roof rather than the flat roof that it currently is. But that you will see from the two sides of that photograph that the building extends, or there are buildings that extend out. So that will be recessed within those buildings. Again, it's not in a highly visible location. Apologies for that confusion. Next slide, please. That's showing the tree-lined driveway that runs in front of the lawn that's directly in front of the building. Next slide, please. That's where that sweeping driveway ends up. So you'll see the vehicles on the left-hand side, kind of the parking area that serves the building. Next slide, please. That's the extent of the lawn. You'll see it's a substantial lawn that's in front of the building. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the end of the slides. As members will have seen from that, the building is quite well enclosed in terms of existing vegetation and trees. Within the as members will have seen, the late representation sheet that was distributed to members included submissions from both the applicant and the current owner of the property, who's intending to sell to the applicant, and also included some further representations from local residents and a submission from an agent acting for a number of local residents as well. Within that, there are the late representation sheet says that the officer's response to the submissions will be made verbally at the meeting. So I would like to point out a number of things to members as a result of those further submissions. Firstly, it's important to note that there is an existing use of these premises, commercial use. It's not simply a change of use of a building from a vicarage or as a dwelling. There is an existing use there that could be continued. Secondly, there's been concern expressed that both the process, and I'll come on to this, but the virtual committee process and the report are biased in favour of the applicant. Well, importantly, members need to appreciate and be aware that there clearly is a presumption in favour of granting planning permission and allowing development unless there are material considerations that would lead you to a different conclusion. So there is always development. Officers have assessed what they believe to be the material considerations and have come to the conclusion that the the application can be supported subject to the conditions set out at the end of the report, and do not believe I do not believe that the report is in fact biased or weighted in favour of the applicants. Concern was expressed particularly with regard to the amount of word space given to the letters of support in support of the application, and the fact that they were referenced in more detail or in greater number than the amount of letters received in opposition to the application. I think clearly, if you look at those pages or those sections of the report, if you take them just on their own, then it would appear that greater consideration was given to the support comments than the objection comments. But I think very importantly, what members need to be aware of, and I would point members to, is that the following sections of the report, particularly section 6, does go into more detail about the concerns raised in opposition to the application and gives and the consideration of those. So all of those are referenced in much more detail, or in greater detail within those pages, which runs to about 10 pages in total. And that section doesn't do the same for any comments that were received in support of the application. So members need to be aware of that point in particular. Again, concern was expressed about the virtual committee process and the fact that the applicants are given potentially longer time to form their final comments on the application than those who may be opposing the application. I don't think that is the case. We tried to follow the committee procedure as it was before COVID and before the turn to virtual committees. The applicants have always been given a final right of reply in following the speakers at a planning committee case. Once the committee report is made public, it's on a Monday previous to a week and a day before the application. Those who may wish to comment on the application have until the Thursday, so effectively 3 working days to make their comment. And thereafter, the applicant is given from that Thursday until the following Monday to make their comments. So in terms of days, it may be slightly longer, but in terms of working days, the same amount of time is effectively given. All representations in terms of that officers are aware of and have received in respect of this application have been referenced either in the report, in the late representation sheet, or by myself in this presentation. So all of those have been referenced and need to be taken into account when members are making their decision. But I would also go on to say that fear of what might happen as a result of a proposal is not a reason in itself for refusing an application, unless it's not a material to take into consideration, unless it can be clearly evidenced by a similar situation or a similar type of development causing issues. And whilst there undoubtedly will be examples of that around the country, there will also be examples of, and I would suggest substantially more examples of children's care facilities being integrated into local communities without issue. So again, officers do not feel that represents a justification for refusal of the planning application. The agent's letter references that the applicants already have a bias in their favour, in that they have a right of appeal if a planning application is refused. That is a national planning policy. That's what happens nationally. The applicants are always given that right of appeal, and if a third party right of appeal were to be introduced, then that would clearly result in a lot more planning applications going to appeal, and would be difficult, I think, it would make the planning process almost unmanageable. So all we are doing is following national policy, basically. There's been, within one of the representations, that it's been referenced that the loss of grant to the church as a result of this planning application being approved and the church having to close. Again, that can only be really described as speculation. And, isn't something that members can or should give weight to in making their decision. I think members also need to, in coming to their own opinions on this, they need to assume that there will be adequate and proper management and safeguards in place to control the use. Those aren't necessary and wouldn't be through the planning process, but there will be other forms of regularization and control that will be imposed on the operators of the proposed unit, and ultimately, if they don't conform and meet those regulations, then they could ultimately be closed down. And that's something that members need to again give weight to, because it's not something that we believe should be controlled or tried to be controlled through the planning process. Finally, 2 points. I think what it's been suggested that in the move to virtual meetings, we've attempted to push this application through quicker than we might otherwise do, and that it should be delayed until a physical meeting can take place. That isn't the case. The application has come forward at a time when we are, as officers, are content that we have all of the information in front of us that is necessary to come to a reasoned recommendation. If the application were to be delayed, and no one knows when we will be back to physical meetings, if the application were to be delayed, then there is, of course, the possibility that the applicants could appeal against non-determination of the application, in which case the decision would be taken out of the local control and out of the authorities' control, and would then rest with the planning inspectorate. And finally, I would just say then that the office's opinion, I think, is a balanced, or the officer recommendation is a balanced and fair one. We stand by the recommendation to approve the application subject to the conditions listed, and officers are concerned that if a reason for if there were to be a decision to refuse the application based on the potential implications in terms of antisocial behaviour and the like, then that would be a difficult thing to defend, and would lead us to ask then if you don't have this kind of facility in a recognised settlement, in a recognised residential location, then where do you have it, and where do you house the potential, the occupiers of the potential unit reasonably? Thank you, Chair. I think that's all I wish to say at this point, but obviously happy to try and answer questions.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor David Evans, Chair of this committee. If there are any public speakers on this matter, they will have submitted a written statement to be read out in accordance with the revised procedure for public speaking. I will therefore ask the solicitor to read out any such statements. Miranda, please.
Thank you, Chair. Miranda Gerard, solicitor speaking. I'll read the statements out in the order that I have them here, which is first of all the agent on behalf of the local residents, followed by a supporter of the application, followed by the chair of the parish council, followed by the local ward member, and finally the agent on behalf of the applicant. The first speaker is therefore Diane Humphreys, agent on behalf of the local residents, and she writes, "The committee should be aware that the vast majority of local residents oppose this application. Many have professional experience of dealing with this type of residential home. Policy CS11, provision of housing for vulnerable people, is caveated and requires proposals of this nature to be in appropriate locations and where there is an identified need. No evidence has been submitted to substantiate either the level of need proposed or to justify why this property in Stotterston is the best suited to accommodate any identified need. CS4 seeks to rebalance rural communities by providing facilities, economic development, or housing for local needs, which should be of a scale that is appropriate to the settlement. In this instance, the scale is considered to be wholly inappropriate. 14 children with issues of varying degrees to be located in a community that has approximately 19 children. This proposal does not represent a rebalancing of this rural community. It does not seek to meet the needs of the local community or the wider parish and its hinterland. CS6 requires proposals likely to generate significant levels of traffic to be located in accessible locations. Stotterston is not easily accessible. Roads into the village are largely single track and rural in nature. Specialist staff, children and visitors would have to travel daily, some distance, by car. There are no other transport options. It has to be concluded that this land use in this location is an unsustainable form of development and as such is contrary to the aims and objectives of both local and national policies. CS8 looks to ensure the development of sustainable places in Shropshire with safe and healthy communities where residents enjoy a high quality of life. This policy returns to whether or not Stotterston is a sustainable location for the development proposed. For the above reasons, it is not. Most importantly, the policy seeks to ensure the impact of any development is not deleterious to existing healthy communities and current quality of life. In a sustainable community, people feel safe and secure. Crime and disorder, or the fear of crime, doesn't undermine the quality of life or community cohesion. There is a vast amount of evidence in Sir Martin Nary's independent review of children's residential care, July 2016, which clearly states that children in homes and children in care generally are still significantly more likely by a factor of 6 to be subject to criminal proceedings than other children. He also states, to compare children in homes to the wider population of children, most of whom have experienced the love and stability of parental care, is to misunderstand the plight of children living in care. We should expect that children, neglected, abused and damaged, as so many have been, to comprise a relatively large proportion of children subject to criminal proceedings. The officer's conclusion that there is no evidence that this home would lead to an increase in crime and disorder within Stotterston over and above any young person living within or visiting from outside of the community is wholly wrong. The fear of crime is real for this small community and is a material planning consideration that needs to be given weight in arriving at any decision. No assurances have been offered by the applicant. That's the end of that statement, Chair. The next speaker is Anthony Eddies Davis, the current owner of the Old Vicarage, who speaks in support of the application. And he states, having read the recent detailed development management report on the planning portal, I wish the following to be included at the meeting on the 2nd of June to support the recommendation of this report. Without repeating the historical use that I have already posted on the portal and evidence used within the report, my support can be easily summarised for the following reasons. 1. As the current occupier, I have struggled with the costs to maintain such a large property in recent years. This application ensures that the property is restored to its grandeur without compromise or impact, and that it will continue to be a prominent feature and asset of the village. 2. Having been a home to 3 generations of my family and children that we brought up within the care system, it proved to be an ideal environment and community to do so. 3. Having operated a business from the site for 30 years, it will be great to see the same continued development and education of young people through the continued use of this property. In summary, I think it would be difficult to find a more suited use for the old vicarage, taking into account its size, location and historical business operations. That's the end of that statement, Chair. The next speaking statement is against the application from David Young, the Chair of Stotterston and Sidbury Parish Council, and he states, having read the Development Management Report, it was disappointing to read the obvious bias in favour of this application. There were 44 points listed for supporters' comments with positive detail included in each one, but only 24 objectors' comments with no supporting detail. The Parish Council organised 2 very well attended public meetings to discuss this application, and the number of people objecting outnumbered those supporting it by approximately 4 to 1. The public comments section on the planning portal will confirm this. We note in 6.5.27 that the objection referencing appeal at Willowfield Care Home, planning reference 1002690, where permission was refused due to an isolated location, is no longer valid as national and local development plan policy has changed, i.e. the goalposts have been moved. The report says, in terms of the location of the site under planning reference 1002690 full, it is significantly more isolated in its position than the old vicarage, being in an area where development is considerably looser knit and where basic amenities could only safely and reasonably be reached by private car. In contrast, Stotterston is tighter knit and benefits from a small number of amenities such as a primary school, doctor's surgery and public house. While it is appreciated that this is significantly less comprehensive than that which would likely be provided in an urban environment, it is more sustainable than that which was proposed under 1002690 full, and would add to the broader offer of Stotterston as the primary location for new development which local planning policy supports. The report goes on to say, Stotterston as the largest village should be the primary location for new development. This is an arbitrary, imagined planning construction which has no relevance in the day-to-day lives of parishioners. The reality is that Stotterston is an isolated community with limited amenities, and those listed are not relevant to proposed service users. The nearest town is 11 miles away, and we stand by our original objection that the old vicarage is not a sustainable location for the proposed application. With reference to 6.5.28 of the report, we believe our objections are also still valid. The NPPF says, a planning decision should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe spaces so that crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine the quality of life or community cohesion. And the Shropshire Core Strategy CS8 also has a similar requirement. There is evidence in the public domain which would indicate there is likely to be an increase in antisocial behaviour and criminal activity amongst children in this type of care setting, and parishioners' fears of an increase in crime are real. The profile of children expected to attend this establishment is different to that of children who have attended the site previously. We would also like to highlight public comments and objections on the portal which describe concerns of both serving and ex-police officers and other professionals involved in similar social care settings regarding emergency incidents and criminal activities. These are from professionals working in the real world, and therefore we believe their concerns should be taken seriously. The isolated location adds further risk to any emergency situation. In conclusion, we urge the committee to consider the above comments seriously before coming to a decision on this planning application. That's the end of that statement, Chair. The next statement is from the local ward member, Councillor Madge Shinton, and she states, I attended both parish council public sessions. The application is for minor adjustments to the conservatory and general maintenance. The officer report is comprehensive and answers many of the non-planning concerns raised at the public part of the parish council meetings. There are no objections to the actual planning proposals for the building. I welcome the planning officer's recommendation to grant permission. Public concern was raised on traffic grounds. Compared to the previous usage of the site in practice, there is potential to reduce the numbers and size and type of vehicular usage. Highways Consultee has no objections. The site is in Stotterston Conservation Area and Shropshire Council Conservation has no objections. And there is a planning condition with regard to materials used on the conservatory. Policy CS1, Strategic Approach, and CS4 recognises Stotterston as a community hub and cluster which encourages development that rebalances rural communities by providing facilities including economic development if appropriate for the settlement. Currently, the public are more acutely aware for the need for the county to provide housing and facilities for vulnerable people across the age spectrum. Policy CS6 says development is to be designed to be adaptable, safe and to contribute to the health and well-being of communities, including safeguarding residential and local amenity. Whilst the fear of crime has been expressed, there is no evidence from the previous usage of this site that this objection is credible. The 8 full-time and 6 part-time children reduce the number and variety of attendees considerably from the site's previous usage. Initially, there would be 12 staff on rota with 3 during the night. The skill level depends on the needs of the children. The provision of a GP surgery, a local primary school, a public house and an on-demand Saturday community bus provide local amenities. The monitoring of the facility will come under the remit of Ofsted and Shropshire Council's Children's Services. I note there has been no response from the police. I fully support this application, including condition 4. And that's the end of the local members' submission. The final one is from Nick Pleasant, the agent on behalf of the applicant, the Compass Group. And this statement reads, Planning Committee members, we hope you can support the carefully considered and clear officer recommendation to grant planning permission for a beneficial use that gives children the chance of a safe, secure and welcoming family home. The first such home they may have ever experienced. This proposal in front of you gives children an opportunity. We chose the old vicarage partly because it's been used successfully and without complaint for over 30 years for care and educational uses, including for children with special needs. We have worked with officers throughout the application and agreed conditions to give officers, members and neighbours comfort on key issues. The home will accommodate up to 8 children on site with up to 6 additional visiting children during normal school hours. We want to reassure you we are a trusted, established and considerate provider with children's best interests at our heart. We have strong values and principles. We are committed to the welfare of children, first, second and always. We operate the highest standard homes. We help children learn how to develop and look after themselves and others. That is why many of our homes gain outstanding Ofsted ratings and why this home would be Ofsted inspected. We know there can be local concerns regarding homes for children. However, in the context of this planning application, very few of the objections raise genuine planning matters. The matters in the objectors' statement to committee are robustly addressed and rebutted in the detailed officer report. It is telling the local school, police and Shropshire Council's housing team have no concerns. We know people worry about the occupants of a children's home. However, those worries are not borne out in the real world and will not be true of the old vicarage. We are considering children, not poorly behaved individuals as some choose to see them. The children may have started their lives without structure, opportunity, boundaries and more importantly genuine love and affection. They may have suffered because of an adult's actions or inactions or been bullied, which undermines their growth and development. We give children a chance and we create a family environment. We invest expertise, time and expense to create the first decent place to live that many of our children will ever have known. For example, we give children a safe bedroom of their own. We provide excellent communal and family areas with a kitchen, living space, dining room and recreational areas. We offer structured group and individual activities. We provide individually supported, personalised education. As would be expected for a family home, There are defined boundaries, rules and structures, with sanctions for failure to follow rules. It is not in anyone's interests to allow poor behaviour. If we allowed poor behaviour, the home would be closed, and this would be a detriment to all involved. We seek to engage with our neighbours and be a good neighbour. This is another reason to set rules and expectations for our children and staff. We engage with neighbours to build understanding and open communication, just as other neighbours do. We hope this provides you with helpful information regarding the proposals. We hope you can follow your officer's recommendation and approve what can be a very beneficial development which gives young people a chance in life. And that's the end of that statement, Chair, and that concludes the public speaking statements.
David Evans, Chair. Thank you, Miranda. Does the Planning Officer, Tim Rogers, wish to clarify any points in this response?
Thank you. Not at this point. As I say, happy to answer questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask committee members for their comments. Please indicate on chat function if you wish to speak. Please remember that when you're asked to speak, members should unmute their microphones, state their name and remute on completion. The solicitor will let me know who is next to speak. Right, members.
Chair, the first indication we have is a request from Councillor Motley.
Councillor Cecilia Motley, would you like to ask your question, please?
Chair, thank you very much. This is Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corvedale Division. The first question I would like to ask is to Tim Rogers. Tim, following on from this very recent representation apparently to the local MP, you stated that there had been a representation also from the applicants. Can you just confirm whether this was from actually from Compass Community themselves, or whether it was from the agent for Compass Community?
It was from the agent.
Thank you. Because this is one of the points that I slightly wanted to make. It seems to me that this is a planning application slightly in two parts. One part which is actually non-controversial, which is the fact that an organisation wants to take over and do up and have a change of use for a substantial building in the middle of the village of Stotterston. And that, if you like, it seems to me, is the easy part of this application. But I think what has really exercised the residents, if I'm right, and I'm absolutely willing to be shouted down about this, is the fact that there seems to have been a lack of clarity coming from the actual applicants themselves, from Compass Community organisation themselves, about their intentions for this site, other than that they are going to have a number of children there of varying ages, but there's no detail to help residents, it seems to me, understand exactly what's going to happen on that site. And I think because of the fear of crime, and because people, particularly in the days of COVID, are very anxious, I think it would have helped hugely if Compass could themselves have made representations and actually just explained all this. For example, it would be interesting to know where the children are coming from. Are they coming from within Shropshire? Are they coming from way outside Shropshire? Does that involve a lot of travel for them, those who are not resident? It would be obviously immensely helpful for Shropshire itself to have another facility like this, I'm sure, particularly if it was dealing with our own children. And yet none of this seems to be clear at all. It would have helped, I think, and I think it might have allayed the fears of some of these residents who have really been quite concerned about this, quite obviously, from all the representations that we've had, if there had been more really concrete evidence of what their intentions were for this site. But as I say, it is, to me, an application of two parts. One, non-controversial, and 1 controversial by virtue of lack of information, if I could put it like that. Thank you.
Are there any points that the planning officer wishes to come back on that, please, Tim?
Just to say, Chair, I hear what Councillor Motley says. The applicants have made whatever submissions they see fit, and have done that primarily, as I understand it, through their agents. I understand that Councillor Motley and others may feel there's a lack of information there as to where the children are particularly coming from, but I think there are 2 points there. It is I think clear at the start of the report and within the application the exact the numbers of children, or the maximum numbers of children that will be involved, so and the number of staff that's involved. So I think that's primarily the thing that members need to be aware of, and secondly, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought slightly, but secondly, that there is an existing use of these premises that is similar in some respects to the use that's now being sought through the application. So it's not as if it's introducing a commercial element into a building which is still in residential use. The fact that there is this existing use is a material consideration. So I think again, members just need to be aware of that fact. It's not a complete an utter change from residential to a kind of a care or a commercial use. There is an element of that in the existing use.
Okay, thank you.
So, sorry, Chair. In other words, people do and will or would have the facility and the need to travel to and from these premises as part of an existing use, as well as happening as part of the proposed. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, Chair, the next request to speak is from Councillor Tyndall.
Councillor Robert Tyndall, please. Councillor Tyndall. I'll have to come back to Councillor Tyndall.
Trying to unmute. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, Councillor Tyndall, carry on.
Thank you. I hope you bear with me a little while on this one, because my electoral division of Brownlee Hill runs almost up to, but not into Stotterston. And I do regard Stotterston as one of the nearby villages to where I live. I declared at the beginning of this meeting that I had not participated in any way whatsoever with the application or the applicants, but I would like to say a few things from my own personal experience. My wife worked as a qualified outdoor instructress at the old vicarage centre, and she has been able to clarify for me the kind of attendees were a very significant range of, for example, on one hand, recovering alcoholics or recovering drug addicts who would come out with their helpers. Then there would be school children coming from inner city areas, possibly just for a day of canoeing or caving or climbing the wall, to week-long residential courses. So I think it's very important that members of the committee acknowledge that many of the uses that carried on before under the previous management are not dissimilar to that which is being proposed now. First of all, the residential nature, the number of staff that accompanied attendees, and they weren't all children. I don't mean the staff, I mean the attendees. and the fact that my wife used to be on her share of night duty living at the old vicarage, none of this none of these experiences dissuade me from the fact that I think this is an excellent application and one that we should wholeheartedly support. And I'm delighted to note or to hear that the local member, Councillor Mad Shinton, supports this application. I have looked and looked, but I cannot find whether Stotterston Local Primary School has commented on this application. Perhaps I should pause at that point just while Mr. Rogers answers that question, and then if I may be permitted, Chairman, just to carry on a little bit.
Thank you. Jim. Can you answer that question, Jim?
Yeah, hello, Chair. Thank you. I'm not aware that the school have commented as an organisation on the application. Obviously, the parish council have made their comment, but not specifically the school.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may carry on.
Yeah, carry on.
I think that's quite a point, really, because the Stotterston Primary School, which, as you all recall, we gave planning permission to extend some months ago, it is just opposite. I mean, it's literally across the road. And I would have thought that if the primary school teachers and governors had any concern about the potential behaviour of the children living and being schooled at the old vicarage centre, they would have voiced them. I've been round some of our own Shropshire Council homes for children on inspections, and I found them extremely well run, the children happy, and those children had all sorts of fairly ghastly backgrounds from what I could see and hear. But I don't think there have been any major problems. I think the staffing ratio sounds extremely good, and I, for one, would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and grant approval to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall.
Chair, the next request to speak is from Councillor Turner.
Councillor David Turner, please.
Thank you, Chair. David Turner, member for Much Wenlock. I think I'd probably just like to preface what I'm going to say by just saying that this is the first virtual meeting of the Southern Planning Committee. I know the Northern one met very recently, and I would commend the officers on the presentation that's been given. It's very helpful and informative. The photographs have been most helpful and display, this handsome property in the substantial plot. I've listened very carefully to the submissions that have been put forward, and indeed have read the representations, including the late representations. And I very rarely take issue with anything that my colleague Councillor Motley says, but I don't think it's particularly relevant to the consideration of this as to where the young people come from, given that my understanding is that Shropshire is home to a number of broadly similar establishments which accommodate people from many different parts of the country. And I think it's also slightly ironic that Shropshire is home to many people who were not born in the county but have chosen to come here for its many positive assets. So, having had regard to the officer report presentation, I'm very happy to second Councillor Tyndall's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Chair, the next request to speak is from Councillor Parsons.
Councillor Tony Parsons, please.
Councillor Tony Parsons, thank you. Yeah, I think in reading through the paperwork and listening to the arguments with regard to this application, it really is down to the one issue of the change of use for the old vicarage, because I think, and although people have raised the issue with regards to highways and traffic. The views from our consultees in highways and conservation and drainage show I don't think that there are any particular problems there that we need to be overly concerned with. The issue is the change of use and the use for the use in future as a care facility. And obviously a lot of the local residents have got fears, particularly with the issue of crime and antisocial behaviour. And I think that can be understood, because this is something that will be new within the area, although I take the point that Robert Tyndall made that this building has been used for other purposes previously. But I can understand the fact that there is this concern, and that can be because of a misunderstanding of the type of people, the type of children that will be cared for here. I mean, I know as a council, as Shropshire Council, we've been very concerned in the past about having to send our children that needed care out of the county and around the country, as far as Glasgow, I believe, to receive the care that they needed. Now, I believe it is better if we can try and deal with this issue within our own county for the children of Shropshire, and the children that may be cared for here may come from a very wide range of different backgrounds, from orphans to people that are the victims of domestic abuse to whatever. There may be very many reasons why children need to be cared for in this facility. I think at the end of the piece, it's all down to how this facility will be managed. And I think the point was made earlier that our own children's services and Ofsted will be taking account of how the facility is managed if it is given permission and it goes forward. And I think we need to look perhaps not too far away to the Willardine facility at Chorley, which is just down the road from here, where I'm sure at the time that facility was given permission, there would have been many concerns, because there we are talking about people who have been convicted of offences or of having issues with addiction. But that facility has worked so well that it is now a model for the rest of the UK in terms of non-custodial sentences. I believe that it is down to the management of how this care home would work, but I believe that this is a sensible use for that particular building, and therefore I'll be supporting this application.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I haven't got any more requests to speak. You may just like to invite in case any members haven't indicated, but there are no other indications so far, and you have had a proposer and a seconder.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, no other speakers. We do have a proposer and a seconder. Does the planning officer wish to make any comments before I take the vote, please?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm happy for you to move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. The solicitor wish to clarify anything before I take the vote, please?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, we now have a proposer and the seconder. We will now take the vote. The solicitor will read out the names of the committee members present and entitled to vote on the items, and they confirm the result of the vote. So if you'd like to take the vote, please, Miranda, which way they want to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, we have a proposer and a seconder, and the proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation, and I shall read these names out. Councillor David Evans, are you for or against the proposal?
For.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Boddington.
For.
Councillor Wood.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Huffer.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Motley.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Tyndall.
For.
Councillor Woodward.
For.
Councillor Woodward, was that for? Sorry.
For, yeah.
Thank you. Chair, that is 8 in favour and that is unanimous.
Thank you. Chair David Evans, that is in favour, and it's unanimous by the committee that this planning application be passed as offered a recommendation. Thank you. We now go on to the list of appeals and decisions. The planning officer wishes to make comments on the appeals.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. We have 4 appeals to report. The first in question is a proposal for 5 bungalows at land off Manor Lane, Longdon. This appeal was dismissed. It was an application refused at the Central Committee in August 2019. Decision there is, whilst Longdon is part of the community cluster, this was not an infill site, and the inspector considered it would reduce the character and the beauty of the countryside, contrary to paragraph 170 of the MPPF. And the fact that the council has in excess of 5-year supply of land means that the presumption in favour of development, sustainable development set out in paragraph 11 of the MPPF does not apply. So the conflict with development plan policies also with respect to the scale and distribution of housing. The next one we have is an appeal that's been lodged. This was a delegated refusal for erection of 3 self-built detached dwellings and a sewage treatment plant on land northeast of Corner Cottages, Orson. In our refusal reason, essentially the officers said that the erection of the 3 large detached houses would not be a single plot development as required by the Sandler plan, would not constitute limited infilling by being removed from the existing built development, and as a consequence the layout and massing would be out of character with the immediate locality, and the extensive built form beyond the existing settlement would be eroding the open undeveloped character landscape. The agents have made a point saying it was going to be a self-build housing scheme, but that is a factor that the officers considered did not outweigh the council's adopted housing planning policy and the harm in this case. So we will await the outcome of that particular appeal. Third item is appeal in relation that's been dismissed in relation to the toilet block, shower room and change of use of land to glamping and touring caravan site at Royal Oak, Alveley, which members recall we did do a site visits there. It was refused at the July committee last year, and the appeal has been dismissed. The inspector majored on Greenbelt issues here, concluding that it would have a greater impact on openness than the existing sites, and there would be moderate visual harm to the openness. It would be spreading done away from the main building, and would therefore be breaching one of the key principles of avoiding encroachment into the countryside, which underlies the purposes of the Greenbelt. He gave very little weight to the financial arguments put forward by the applicants that it would support the existing public house, finding a number of faults and flaws in what was put forward, and concluded in the very end that there were no very special circumstances to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, and the visual harm could not be mitigated by imposing a landscape condition in that case. And the final one we have is again at Longdon, which was an outline application for up to 12 dwellings, land west of the rectory, Cleely Lane, Longdon. Delegated refusal, appeal dismissed. Very similar to the first case before today, site would not have been infilling, would lead to an over provision of housing in the area against development guideline. This year it was going to be a very, very substantial increase over the indicative figures in the Sandler policy. And he also considered that it would actually cause harm to the countryside by the encroachment, and that the provision of 2 affordable dwellings did not outweigh that harm to the environment. And again, reference is made to the council having 5-year land supply in excess of 5 years, and therefore we have an up-to-date housing plan policies, and therefore the presumption in favour of sustainable development in the MPPF does not apply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Does the planning officer or solicitor have any comment on the appeals, please?
I have no other comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member of the committee want to comment on the appeals, please? No? Right. The date of the next meeting will be held on Tuesday the 30th of June at 2 o'clock. Chairman concludes the agenda. I will now close the meeting and ask committee officers to end the live event.